Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Thursday, December 4th, 2025. My longtime friend and collaborator, Colonel Tony Shaffer, joins us now. Colonel, always a pleasure.
Morning.
Welcome back here. Thank you for giving us the time. I want to talk to you about the current state of affairs in Ukraine and how long you think it can last and where you think it's going. But before we get there, because it's on the front pages and because we both know personally the Secretary of Defense, can you weigh in on the latest imbroglio? Isn't it a crime to kill unarmed, non-combatant civilians?
Well, yes, but it's something that we've been doing for decades. I'll just bring up my book, Operation Darkheart. In Darkheart, Judge, you may recall there's a chapter where I'm asked to provide intelligence to verify the location of what we call an HVT, high value target. We thought one of Hekmatyar's deputies, Hekmatyar being the Hekmatyar group, HIG, was one of the smaller terrorist organizations supporting bin Laden. This is back in 2003. And I couldn't get Intel to verify it, the location. Basically, it was a madrasa, a school in the mountains where they thought he was hanging out and hiding, he himself and one of his deputies. So the idea was they were going to strike that location. And I recommended against it because I could not obtain intelligence or to verify, to validate the strike, the other intel. You need to have multiple sources. And so I thought it was done. Well, I came back later that night. This is about 3 a.m. And they decided, and I decided this was decision by Central Command, put down the chain of command directed to strike anyway. The madrasa. Well, the madrasa, it turned out there were women and children. There was no bad guys. And a lot of civilians died. This is the same thing that happened under Barack Obama when they struck after the Abbey Gate. They hit one of the aid workers. So I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but I can tell you that I was frustrated by the fact that there was an overwhelming proclivity to lean forward and just go shoot things and ask questions later, which is, I think,
if you had been Admiral Bradley and you saw two non-combatant survivors clinging to the remnants of the boat, and you asked the Secretary of Defense, "What do you want me to do?" and he said, "Kill them," would you have complied with that order?
I don't know if that happened.
Notwithstanding
so, Judge, yeah. So, I have a few inside folks. I don't have the impression that was what happened. My impression was once the legal traps were, and again, lethal process outlined in Darkheart. People can read about it. We have a whole chapter devoted to how we've established this lethal process. Not here to judge it. I'm just telling you what happened.
Right.
The bureaucracy is huge at the Pentagon, as you and I know. One of the things that always happens is, no offense to you, the lawyers get involved. The lawyers have a significant say. And so
are they military lawyers or are they civilians or both?
Well, they're both. They're both. So within a typical operation, you're going to have, at this level, you would have an 06, either captain or colonel, JAG, involved with probably one or two deputies, probably lieutenant commanders and commanders or majors, lieutenant colonels. And you're going to have civilians who were GS-15s, and probably you've seen at least one general level equivalent, a senior executive. I know because I've had to deal with these guys directly. I've been called in on operations, especially lethal operations. And they basically have a criteria. Each criteria is different for every operation. They measure a number of factors that I don't even know.
Let me just stop you. Would this kind of hair splitting go on while a decision needed to be made or in advance?
That's my point. So once the decision's made, The decision is given from the civilian leadership, Pete Hegseth, to the military leadership, Raising Cane. Once that's done, the military takes over and does its thing. That's what I'm saying. And that's why this whole narrative that Pete said do a double tap, it's not possible, because once that word is given, the military does everything. There's no civilian input. Civilians have nothing to do except they wait for the results. So
is there an ethos in the military to kill everyone no matter what, or is there an ethos? Let me finish, Tony. Or is there an ethos in the military to follow the rules of engagement and the Geneva Conventions?
There's an ethos. The people I've worked with, I don't know everybody, but the people I've worked with had an attitude of being careful regarding civilian life. That the terrorists, they don't care about, and I don't honestly care about them either. I think there's certain targets that you can take out. But remember, Judge, and this is a bit of a sore point, no terrorist organization on the planet ever signed up to the Geneva Convention. The Geneva Conventions don't apply to them. We have rules that we internally apply to certain activities relating to civilians. So civilians, we try not to hit. There's a certain degree of humanity, I guess I'll say, that's assigned to the military and the operations. For example, summary executions, even though they would technically be legal when you capture someone on the battlefield, because that person did not sign up to the Geneva Conventions, that's not done. At least I think, not in my circles, not anything I've done.
Okay.
So my point is that once the decision's made, there are certain restrictions that are taught as Geneva Convention broadly, the broad category of the rules, the law of land warfare. We all get taught that, but there's nothing specific that says in an operation that everybody's going to. As a matter of fact, in a lot of the operations I was in, once the decision's made, you anticipate nobody coming out of it because you send in a team that does sensitive site exploitation. So again, this is all. I wrote about this in the book, and I know at one point an independent reporter was investigating the madrasa hit, and nobody ever went after to find out what happened exactly. But I think there is I'll say this, and there's an over aggressiveness that often will allow the fog of war to permit the death of innocent people, which again is something I'm against. So.
Okay, I'm going to play you a clip, and then we'll get to Ukraine, which is what I really want to ask you about.
Sure.
I'm going to play you a clip of Secretary Hegseth referring to stupid rules of engagement. You let me know what you think. It's not very long.
All right.
And others on this show that you know and respect, colleagues of yours and mine, have said this is evidence of his intent to kill. Number 7.
We unleash overwhelming and punishing violence on the enemy. We also don't fight with stupid rules of engagement. We untie the hands of our warfighters to intimidate, demoralize, hunt, and kill the enemies of our country. No more politically correct and overbearing rules of engagement. Just common sense, maximum lethality, and authority for warfighters. That's all I ever wanted as a platoon leader. And it's all my E6 squad leaders ever wanted, back to that E6 rule. We let our leaders fight their formations, and then we have their back. It's very simple, yet incredibly powerful.
Imagine a prosecutor playing that in front of a jury with Pete at the defense table.
Yeah, well, I'll just say it. I'm with him. I've been Judge. We've not talked about every lethal incident I've been in, and from the beginning, since I was a very young 20-year-old, having to act to counter a target specifically that I was not prepared. I thought, man, this is bad, and my first lethal engagement. You want to be able to defend yourself and direct your men or women to be effective without regard to worrying if they're going to be second guessed after the fact. That's what I see there. Now in Afghanistan, again, Operation Dark Heart, I was outside the wire a lot because I'm an operator. I'm not an analyst. I'm a guy out with the guys doing the hard work of intelligence collection and special operations. So that's my job. When you're out there, things happen, and you literally don't want to be always worrying, gee, if I do this, am I going to have to worry about that? When I was there, the first tour, rules of engagement were very liberal. You see someone with a weapon, they threaten you, you have the right to take it out. Very simple, very, very easy. And by the way, we had no bad incidents of shooting. Again, you can look in the book. There was almost a couple of incidents that I document. So my point is, I don't see that as anything more than someone who's been in combat saying we need to unrestrict and allow those men and women in combat to have the maximum authority to use the force necessary to protect them and achieve their military objectives.
All right. One more clip showing a variety of statements from the Secretary of Defense.
Sure.
One going back to the days when you and I worked with him at Fox. And then we'll get to Ukraine. Chris, cut number 16.
There are some guys at Leavenworth who made really bad choices on the battlefield. And I do think there have to be consequences for abject war crimes. If you're doing something that is just completely unlawful and ruthless, then there is a consequence for that. That's why the military said it won't follow unlawful orders from their commander-in-chief. There's a standard, there's an ethos, there's a belief that we are above what so many things that our enemies or others would do.
I watched it live. We knew exactly who was in that boat, we knew exactly what they were doing, and we knew exactly who they represented.
I watched that first strike live. As you can imagine, at the Department of War, we got a lot of things to do. So I didn't stick around for the hour and 2 hours, whatever, where all the sensitive site exploitation digitally occurs. So I moved on to my next meeting. I did not personally see survivors, but I stand, because the thing was on fire. It was exploded and fire and smoke. You can't see anything. You got digital. This is called the fog of war.
What do you think?
Again,
is he going to blame Admiral Bradley?
I don't know if there's blame. Bradley was the guy who, once the decision was made, had the responsibility to destroy the target. And let me say something else. I've worked another book, The Last Line. By the way, our friend Catherine Herridge is in this one. The Last Line is a work of fiction. This is about what's happening. If anybody wants to understand what we're doing, just saying, this is what's going on. This book I wrote. I don't know if you've ever read it, but it's based on what I thought was going to happen. We wrote this back in 2011, 2012. Basically, it's about what's happening between Latin America and America regarding lethal operations to counter drugs. Just say if you want, it's in here, literally. So my point being is that this transit zone operational area has been a bit of a conundrum for DoD for a long time. To Pete's point, we know generally down to who is on the boat and what they had for breakfast that morning. That's how good the intel is, because we've been developing this for 30 years. So when he says we knew who was on the boat, we know what was going on, they have a ton of information that's led up to that point in time saying that's a drug boat, we're going to take it out. So I have no sympathy for the bad guys. When the admiral is given that task, his job is to make sure that boat stops and all the cargo is destroyed. Did people die incidental to that? Yeah, no doubt. But should they have given those people an option to maybe not die? Yeah, when I was doing this, the coasties would always do interdictions and give those crews a chance to surrender. So I think, again, for any number of reasons, but in this case, the decision was to, again, the lethal decision tree, which is in here, lawyers are part of, make that decision. So what I always do is go back and blame the lawyers.
Somehow I'm not surprised. We're going to switch gears to Ukraine. Here's what President Putin said shortly before a meeting with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner on Tuesday. I'd like your thoughts. Chris, cut number 12.
We are not planning to go to war with Europe. I've said that 100 times already. But if Europe suddenly wants to go to war with us and starts it, we are ready right now. There can be no doubt about that. The only question is, in what way? If Europe suddenly starts a war with us, I think it will be over very quickly. This isn't Ukraine. With Ukraine, we're acting in a surgical, careful manner, right? So that, well, you get it, right?
With Ukraine, we're acting in a careful, surgical manner, using his fingers to mimic either a pencil drawing or a scalpel in the surgeon's hands. With Europe, it would be over quickly. What is he talking about?
So I think in this area, you and I are going to have a lot of agreement. So yeah, this has been completely taken out of context, because when I saw the headline on this, Putin ready to fight Europe, it's like, no, it's not what he said. He said, if the Europeans start the war, we're prepared to answer. And by the way, he said something very chilling by the fact he said, well, if we go to war for a while, we wouldn't know who to negotiate with, which implies they would go for decapitation strikes, which I wouldn't doubt, because the Russians, I think they're pretty perturbed by the Europeans, as am I, as are we. But I digress. The whole idea is, Judge, and we've been very clear on this. This is something we've agreed upon from the beginning. The special military operation is not an invasion of Ukraine. It was never an invasion of Ukraine. It was specifically the 4 provinces which they're currently after, and that's it. No less, no more. They don't want all of Ukraine. And this constant drumbeat by the Europeans saying, "Oh, we need to be prepared for war. We need to fight Russia," is insane. And again, someone who's actually fought the Cold War. My first assignments, I was referring to a little bit earlier, were in Germany. We were working against the Russians, the Soviets. And I tell you for a fact, Judge, that we knew what it would take for a Soviet land army, a land, military force to do something. There's no indications that the Russians today have anything necessary regarding the logistics capacity to do an invasion. So it's all a fiction. What Europe is pushing for and Putin is pushing back on is another freeze. You've probably already heard this from your other experts, but the EU is pushing for Minsk III, which is basically a freeze which gives the Europeans time to help encourage and rearm Ukraine and allows Zelensky to continue.
Putin would never agree to that.
Never. And I think that's what Jared Kushner was there to kind of offer. Is like, hey, we really want to offer this. And then one of the big sticking points is NATO, because the Ukrainians keep saying, "Oh, it's in our constitution that we have to be members of NATO." It's like, okay, you put that in there. That's really unhelpful. But no, we're going to ignore that. And what Kushner and team said was, well, yeah, they say that, but we're going to put it in the NATO charter that Ukraine can't become a member. And Putin doesn't trust him. I wouldn't trust him either. Just
what is the condition of the Ukrainian military today?
It's horrible. The resources that the United States provided is kind of winding down. We had so much money devoted to this. So much of the material support is continuing today. And it's just a year into the Trump administration where things kind of dropped off January. So we're coming up on 11 months. And the other thing is manpower. Let me do a small illustration. I was listening to Alex Christoforo, Alexander McCurlis, and the great guys over at the Duran. And they were talking about one of the body exchanges. They don't really have prisoner exchanges right now, but they have body exchanges. So in one of the recent exchanges of the dead between Russia and Ukraine, Ukraine showed up with, I think, 61 dead Russians. The Russians showed up with 1,000 dead Ukrainians. So that's kind of the odds of what's happening right now. And the Ukrainians have a number of oblasts where they're not doing well. Pokrovsk just fell. There's a small town on the outskirts of Pokrovsk where they've got 2,000 Ukrainians caught in a cauldron where they don't think they can get out. That's a lot of men for the Ukrainians. 2,000 people is a lot of men. And so the situation in the battlefield is horrific. And this is what I think the Russians are facing. The Russians don't want to see a collapse of Ukraine, despite what everybody keeps saying. It's like, no. They don't want to see everything collapse. That would be bad, because that means someone has to come in and stabilize the country. They don't want that. So I think right now the Russians are continuing a slow but steady attrition of the the Ukrainian military. That is to say, they're going to wear it down. But they don't want to cause failure of the government of Ukraine for a number of reasons. Most of those we would probably agree with.
Let me let you veer into an area that I know you love, which is politics. Where's Marco Rubio? He was not in Geneva with the foreign ministers of NATO, and he certainly wasn't in Russia with Putin, LtCOL, and Kushner.
So I think there is a tag team effort going right now. Let me be clear on this. My interpretation, I don't have inside information on this. I think Rubio is fed up with the Europeans. I think, who isn't? You know, I mean, I don't know of anybody right now who thinks that Kaja Kallas and Ruta are doing anything except trying to undermine the talks at this point. So I think Rubio is going to ignore them, rightly so. I think he's been spending time in some other places regarding trying to convince the Ukrainians to stop, to basically accept the terms of what's going on. I think that's why you see him working more quietly behind the scenes. And Steve Witkoff and Kushner are kind of on the front right now trying to deal with Putin and company. And they're back briefing the Europeans because I don't know why. I wouldn't do it. But I think at this point, Trump is going to pick whoever he thinks has the best shot at getting it done. I think that's why they brought back in Jared Kushner. Wouldn't have been my choice, but Jared Kushner's back in there with Steve Witkoff trying to be, I think, the lead team on this.
Colonel Shaffer, thank you very much.
Yeah.
We went across the board. Next time, Venezuela, but I appreciate your thoughts and I appreciate your time, Tony.
Yes, sir.
Let's
you,
get
Judge.
Together again on air before Christmas if we can.
Yes, sir. I'll be around. Thank you.
Thank you. All the best. A busy day coming up for you. At 11 o'clock this morning, Colonel Douglas McGregor. At 11:30 this morning, Max Blumenthal. At 1 this afternoon, Professor Glenn Deason. At 2 this afternoon, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. At 3 this afternoon, Professor John Mearsheimer. At 4 this afternoon, I'm not sure where he is, maybe Italy this time, Pepe Escobar. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.